All right, so let's get started with decoding change. Hello, for those of you who don't know me, I am in Florida, in Melbourne, Florida, actually. I'm originally from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, so if you're detecting an accent, that's where that's from. And Melbourne, Florida is about an hour and 15 minutes away from the nearest Magic Kingdom park. And yes, I know exactly. I know exactly how far I am from Disney Springs. I know how far I am from Magic Kingdom, and I know how far I am from Epcot. My car goes automatically there. So as you can see, I'm a huge Disney fan. This is my daughter Maggie on the picture with me. This is an Animal Kingdom. And I am the program director for the Bachelor of Science in Organizational Leadership at Barry University. Our program is for learning adults, especially adults who are trying to finish their degree. Maybe they have a lot of college credits already and they would like to finish their degree. So I'm saying that because maybe you have employees in your organization who would be interested in it, and it's all online with synchronous video classes once a week. We also offer a Master of Science in Leadership and Innovation, a Master of Science in Human Resource Development, and a doctorate in organizational leadership with a specialization in human resource development. So that's my, inevitable plug. If you're interested in any of that, just get in touch with me at cwildermuth@barry.edu. Okay, the session is being recorded. I already said that. I put on the chat, I believe, the link to the slides. I'm doing that again. And also that's the QR code for the slides, but don't worry about it because I programmed WebEx to send you a letter after this webinar, including the SHRM code and the slide address and all that kind of stuff. By the way, the WebEx letter is looking awful, but I didn't have time to correct all the HTML. And I said, okay, that's it. The information is there though. In terms of SHRM, I'm going to be sharing the SHRM code. It's worth what? 0.5. It's half an hour, so it's worth 0.5 PDCs. If you don't know what I'm talking about with SHRM, you don't need it. Don't worry about it. Those who know what it is are the ones who probably need it. And that's going to be available to you at the end of the session. And also, like I just said, I will be sending it to you by email. In terms of the roadmap for our very, very brief time together, I'm going to be talking about leadership myths, change myths, and then some what else? What do you do then? What are some of the things that you could be doing in your organization? All right, so how I always start, and I already noticed in the participant list that there are some people in there who were my graduate students at Drake University in the past. Hello, I see you, and it's kind of exciting to see your names there. So you may remember this picture, and that's a picture that I very often use. Let me move my video here. That's a picture that I very often use when I am asking people what this picture when I'm going to talk about change. And I ask people, what does this picture have to do with change? If you would like to participate in the exercise, just to make things a little interactive, if you go to Slido, slido.com on your phone or wherever, and you enter 3204267, you will be able to answer directly, and then we will see the answers. I set it up to be anonymous. I hope it works. Actually, after I see the first one, I will see, but that's how I set it up so that the answers are totally anonymous. If you prefer, you can also give your share your answer in the chat. I'll give you a few minutes to think about that. And just to show you the picture again, in case you're like, what picture? There it is. Often change can be a murky mess, and I confirm that it's anonymous. So thank you for the brave first person. The weather will change in seasons. I love when I ask this question because people always think of different things that I hadn't thought of. Seasons change, unknown environment. What you see now can change quickly. Okay, Awesome. Thank you so much for your participation. It's cloudy before it becomes clear, death before renewal. I love this. Nothing is forever, change is inevitable. Okay. Temporal issue, a matter, don't get comfortable. I love your ideas. It will be fun to review them after the session. You can do that. By the way, this system is called Slido.com. I have absolutely nothing to do with this company, but it's just an extension that you can add to your Chrome, and then you can add it automatically to your slide, and it's totally free. Yeah, I don't have anything to do with this company, but everybody who knows me knows that I am the queen of finding free stuff on the internet. Slido is one of them. So, FYI. Okay, in terms of my inspiration, these are two books that I think are must read. Neither of them is particularly new, and both of them are available on Amazon. No, I have nothing to do with that either. I don't have a link on Amazon or anything like that. I just love these books. The first one is called The Practice of Adaptive Leadership. It is by Ronald Heifetz, Alexander Grashow, and Marty Linsky. And the second is leadership. So that's the practice of adaptive leadership. The second one is called Leadership and the New Science by the brilliant, brilliant, brilliant Margaret Wheatley. Everything Dr. Wheatley touches is brilliant. I'm a huge fan. So these are must books for your must read books for your library. Strongly recommend them. And combining them will give you a lot of inspiration as well. So I just wanted to acknowledge those authors before I go on. Also, I wanted to acknowledge the context, because some of the things that I'm going to say today, some of you especially from an organizational life, may think, okay, this is unrealistic. What she's talking about, that's not what happens in the real world. Keep in mind that what I'm talking about is leadership, not, oops, what did I do? Leadership, not management. The difference between leadership and management, well, there are various, but one of them is that management requires authority, leadership does not. Leadership could be taking place in your community, in your family, and pretty much any situation that you find yourself in, and it could take place in your organization, even regardless of your position. Also, I am discussing leadership in times of change specifically. I'm not talking about the maintaining the status quo and making sure the work is organized and making sure everybody knows what it is that they're doing. I'm talking about a swamp, which is what the picture that you just saw before. So I am using here the definition of leadership that was offered by Heifetz et al. In the practice of adaptive leadership, mobilizing people to thrive during times of change. So mobilizing means inspiring, empowering, getting people ready to start. Thrive means that it's more than surviving. They're actually going to do well. And in times of change means that leadership, according to Heifetz, Grashow and Linsky, is only understood within the context of change. So what these authors basically say is that leadership is what you do, not who you are. It's not a permanent state of being. It's an action. It's what you're doing at that time, and it can only be understood within a context of change. Otherwise, we're talking about management. So wanted to clarify that before I go into the leadership myths, not necessarily the management myths. The first myth is what I like to call the magic telescope. And that myth is perpetuated by the fascination of the leadership literature and the leadership experts on the word vision. I had a conversation with another brilliant author whose name is Dr. Sharon Dale Sparks. She wrote a book called Leadership Can Be Taught. And what she said to me was, leadership is not about having a vision. The leader does not necessarily have a magical vision. The leader has and shares a sense of purpose, but not necessarily the vision. So in a murky time of change in which you are at that swamp, you don't see the future. And the leader does not see the future either. It's also important to differentiate leadership from entrepreneurship. Yes, entrepreneurs can also be leaders. Entrepreneurs very often have a vision of the future that they want to see implemented. But I'm not necessarily talking about entrepreneurship. I'm talking about adaptation. And who is it that is going to be helping people through the adaptation? By definition, in a murky time of change, nobody knows what lies beyond that swamp. The second myth is related to the first one, and I call it the invisible map. So if you think about those mazes that you played with when you were a kid, or maybe you still do, that you have to find the way through the maze to get to the end, if you are at the end and you look back, you see exactly where your false entries were, what barriers you could have avoided if you had just taken the straight path to the end. But that's not the way mazes work. When you start working on the maze, you probably will have a lot of false steps. You will go into barriers and then you will have to come back. Leadership in a time of change, the leader is also starting the maze and they don't know either where the barriers are. The next one, which is, it comes from the great man theories, and yes, I'm using the word man on purpose because that's how it used to be seen. It was definitely seen as a male endeavor. The great men theories of leadership, in which the idea was you would learn from the great man, and that's how you would learn how to be a leader. That you may hear that and say, oh, come on, Cris, this is like 1940, yeah, 19th century. This is like Thomas Carlyle two centuries ago. Actually, no, that myth has perpetuated. And I can hear that myth every time there is a political campaign of some sort. And whoever candidate, and I'm not being political here because that goes across the board, will promise the world. And guess what? We will believe the world. We will believe that actually that one person magically can solve problems that have been going on from generations. And obviously they can't solve those problems alone. So that myth of the leader that is a superhero and is going to take people to a land of perfection and safety, that is a myth. So what we often see in our heads, what we imagine when we hear the word leadership, especially because in organizations love using the word leader instead of manager because somehow it sounds, I don't know, more sexy or more interesting. So what we imagine is that it's something like the picture on the screen in which you have some person on the front who gives direction, who has a vision, who has a map, who knows exactly where they're going, and then a whole bunch of people who actually absolutely follow them, almost like a military formation. When in reality, in times of change, what you have is that it's a swamp. Nobody knows what lies ahead. Okay, so those were the leadership myths that I wanted to start with. I know there are more. In fact, my good friend Roger Carlson, I'm shout out to you, just sent me a link or a note just before this webinar started with many other leadership myths. And I loved, thank you, Roger, including the leader is always popular, the leader, I can't remember everything that was in there, but the leader is always charismatic, the leader is always an extrovert. There are countless myths on leadership. I just included a few that I thought were more relevant today. Now let's go into the change myths. And here is my favorite myth, and that is people resist change. How many times have you heard that sentence? People resist change. It is people's favorite saying, especially when things are getting messy and a change process is happening. And sometimes it's a simple process, but people are resisting it somehow. And then the easy way out for the people in charge is to say, well, my employees are just resisting change. So let me ask you a question. Imagine that's tomorrow you, I don't know, won the lottery and got $100 million. I have no idea, by the way, if you can get $100 million in the lottery. I don't play the lottery. But imagine that you could. How many people do you know who would resist earning $100 million? I don't know too many. And mind you, there will be considerable changes in your life if you win $100 million. I would love to see that. So people don't resist change. What people resist is loss. So if people are resisting change, it's because they are perceiving a loss. Even if the change seems minor to you, it is actually major for that person, or is being perceived as major for that person. One important distinction that Heifetz and his colleagues make is between what they call a technical problem and an adaptive challenge. A technical problem is just that. It's technical. It can be solved. And most importantly, when you have a technical problem, there is an expert. So, for example, if you are, I don't know, designing an e-learning course and you want to know how to make it look pretty or how to fix the HTML, it may be difficult to do that, maybe. But if you ask me, I can tell you exactly how to do it because I love technology and I've taught myself how to do that. So there is an expert, and God knows there are better experts than me on that particular example that I gave you. When you're talking about an adaptive challenge, the solution is unknown. There are no experts. By definition, there's nobody with a magical telescope. There's nobody with a magical map. And very deep cultural changes are needed, including changes in your very soul, changes in your DNA. Those changes can be painful. For example, if your organization has always prided itself on giving stellar and customized customer service, maybe the new conditions don't allow you to do that. If you have seen your identity as being, I'm going to use a current example, you're a professor of writing, you're a professor of English, and now your students are using artificial intelligence to improve that text. Embracing that change and figuring out how to live in this new world changes your very soul, your identity, how you see yourself. That is the loss that is being perceived in an adaptive challenge. And again, that's the context that we're talking about. The next myth that I see in change is everyone can win. You can go, the leader can go into this land of milk and honey in which there's a win-win. And if only we look far enough, we're going to find that win-win solution. When in reality, change is hardly ever benign. And there are people who will suffer considerable loss, which means that then when we talk about what is it that the leader can do, one of the things the leader can do is diagnose the loss and support people through the process of loss, because that is going to happen, most likely going to happen. The last myth that I'm going to bring in terms of change is that if only you have the right person and that person uses the right fishbone, I don't know, graph or force field analysis method or whatever method we use to identify the cause of the problem, we address the cause of the problem and that problem is solved. And yay, we are adapted to the new environment. The problem is we're talking, and that's where Margaret Wheatley's work come in, you're talking about complex adaptive systems. They are complex by definition. Every cause is related to another cause that is related to something else. And in the middle of change, new things emerge. Almost like if you think of what am I looking for? A laboratory experiment in which you mix some chemicals and then something else emerges. And some of these emergent issues are unexpected and sometimes unwanted and very difficult to get rid of. So it's not just about finding a cause. Okay, so I've given you all sorts of bad news, in a way, bad news and good news, right? Like, so you're not the genius, you're not the hero, you're not the savior. So what is it then that you can do in a situation of change? The first thing is this. Even though I'm not talking about leadership as a job, I'm talking about leadership as an action. Those of us who grab leadership, who are inclined to say, okay, people are paralyzed. Let me see if I can mobilize people to work together to solve this problem or to solve this complex array of problems. Usually the people who do that are also doers. They desperately want to take action. They want something done. And that bias for action can be our downfall. Because in a complex swamp, you need to take the time to observe what's going on. You need to take time to really diagnose the situation. So avoid starting to act too fast. The next thing you need to do is diagnose the losses. So if there is a massive change going on, the first thing the leader needs to understand is what losses are being perceived, however it is that that can be done. That is basic and absolutely critical, because if you don't diagnose the losses, you're not going to understand why it is that people are resisting them, the change, and you're not going to know how to support the people who are experiencing losses. Next point here is that a leader's main job is to foster a culture of that adaptation, a culture of acceptance of change, a culture of acceptance that losses are inevitable. In other words, the job of a leader is to breed new leaders before the adaptation is necessary. At that time in which you're just managing and organizing, you should already be preparing your people for situations of change. Very often throughout my career, I've seen organizations running change leadership workshops or programs or training or coaching only for people in quote unquote leadership positions, AKA directors, executives, managers, and so on. When in reality, that kind of information, what I'm sharing with you today, should be shared with the university, sorry, I'm thinking of universities here, should be shared with the group, with the group involved as a whole. Everybody needs to understand what change means, what adaptation is, what losses could happen. Acknowledge the complexity of the swamp, acknowledge that you don't have a map, and acknowledge that you're not the savior. You cannot solve the problem. And if you tell people that you are solving the problem, and by the way, I talked about politicians, I also see that in interviews for high executives, like when I've seen that in the past in other universities, when I was in committees, everybody who is being interviewed, not only they say they're going to solve the world, but also in the committee, you prepare those interview questions that almost lead the person to tell you that they're going to solve the problems, when in reality, everybody should know that that is not really possible. And finally, ask for and accept help. Because if you don't have the magic map and you don't have the magic telescope, you're not an expert, because by definition, there's no expertise on what lies beyond the swamp. Then you should consider the collective and what the collective can do. One of you before talked, I was very briefly taking a look here at the chats. It's kind of hard for me to handle the chats and the presentation at the same time. And this person, thank you so much, Alex, he said, or he or she said, normally when you talk about leadership, followership comes to mind. Yes, and leadership and followership can also be seen as a dance or a passing of the baton. I have the geese on the screen because I love the idea of the geese, in which when the head goose gets tired, they stay behind, and another goose stays behind to support that goose to come back, and some other goose takes over. It's a passing of the baton that takes place. Or as another brilliant writer, Ira Chalef, who writes about followership, says, it's a tango dance. In fact, if you go to YouTube, look for leadership and followership tango dance, and you're going to find a gem of a brief video talking about leadership and followership and how it works. So in summary, avoid bias for action, observe, diagnose the losses and support the people who experience them. You're not the savior. Ask for help as needed. And the leader's main role is to prepare followers for change before change is needed. Okay, so now to finish this up, I'm looking here at the time. I have exactly 3 minutes. Okay, so I wanted to ask you for one thing you will remember from today's like super brief half an hour. Just one thing. And it's the same place where you were before, slido.com, 324267, or write it on the chat if you prefer. People who don't resist change, they resist loss. That is from the practice of adaptive leadership, and I love that. Margaret's book, The Job of a Leader is to Breed New Leaders. Don't act too quickly. Adaptive versus technical change, that's also from the practice of adaptive leadership. And a leader is not the savior. Thank you so much for that. Change is like a maze. Oh, thank you about that. And leadership does not require authority. Okay, by the way, for those of you who are lovers of The Handmaid's Tale, I spent the entire last year writing a book on leadership and The Handmaid's Tale that is now thankfully in the hands of the publisher, Emerald Publisher, hopefully to be published next year. And if you're familiar with the series The Handmaid's Tale, a lot of the leadership that is taking place in there is resistance kind of leadership that has absolutely nothing to do with authority. So just for you to keep that in mind. Okay, I'm going to stop recording now because I'm going to share the SHRM information, and contractually I can't do that in a recording. So let me stop the recording and stop.